The massive Imperial ship appeared on Earth's long-range scanners at exactly 3:47 a.m. Greenwich time. Its size alone made every military commander on Earth pause. The vessel was larger than Manhattan. Yet despite its impressive scale, the humans manning Earth's defense stations merely logged its arrival and continued their duties with practiced calm. Inside the United Defense Council's main chamber in Geneva, Ambassador James Miller adjusted his plain black tie and watched the massive wall screen showing the approaching vessel. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional whisper between council members. "They're right on schedule," General Roberts said, checking his watch, just like the deep space probes predicted. Miller nodded, his gray eyes studying the strange geometric patterns on the Imperial ship's hull. The aliens had announced their coming 3 days ago, broadcasting their message in perfect English. The message had been simple. The Galactic Empire was expanding, and Earth lay in their path. The council chamber's doors opened, and a young officer rushed in. "Sir, they're requesting permission to send a shuttle to the neutral meeting point." "Granted," Miller said, standing up. "Let's go meet our new friends." The shuttle landing zone had been prepared in a large field outside Geneva. As Miller walked toward the landing pad with his small team, he couldn't help but smile at the perfectly ordinary scene. Birds were still singing, and in the distance, a farmer was tending his fields as if alien ships weren't filling the sky above. The Imperial shuttle descended with a quiet hum, nothing like the roar of human spacecraft. It was beautiful, Miller had to admit, all smooth lines and glowing blue energy fields. The landing ramp extended, revealing High Lord Blake of the Empire. Blake looked almost human, except for his silver-tinted skin and slightly larger eyes. He wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor, covered in symbols of rank and achievement. Behind him stood 4 guards in simpler but still impressive battle armor. "Welcome to Earth," Miller said, stepping forward with an easy smile. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Blake seemed taken aback by the casual greeting. You seem very calm, Ambassador Miller. Should we be otherwise?" Miller asked, gesturing toward the waiting conference building. "We're civilized people meeting to discuss important matters, shall we?" Inside the conference room, Blake wasted no time presenting the Empire's terms. He spread a holographic map showing Earth's position relative to Imperial space. "Your world sits at a crucial junction of our expansion routes. The Empire offers you the opportunity to join our civilization peacefully. Your people will be granted Imperial citizenship, subject to standard integration protocols." Miller studied the map carefully, noting how the Empire's territory spread like an inkblot across the galaxy. "And if we decline?" "Ambassador," Blake said with a slight frown, "perhaps I should be clearer. This is not a negotiation. The Empire has never failed to absorb a world in its path. We prefer peaceful integration, but we have other methods." Miller sat back in his chair, still wearing that same calm smile. "I understand completely, High Lord Blake, and we appreciate the Empire's generous offer. However, proper protocol requires that we consult with our full governing body. We request 48 standard hours to review your terms." Blake's expression shifted from confusion to slight amusement. "You seem to misunderstand, Ambassador. Your military capabilities are well known to us. You have barely achieved spaceflight. You have no defense against our technologies." "Perhaps," Miller said, standing up, "but we would still appreciate the courtesy of 48 hours to provide a formal response. Unless, of course, the mighty Empire refuses such a simple diplomatic request." Blake's face twitched slightly. This wasn't going according to the standard integration protocol. Where was the fear? The awe? The immediate submission? These humans were acting as if they were equals, not a primitive species about to be absorbed into the Empire. "Very well," Blake said finally. "You have 48 hours. We look forward to your response." As Miller walked back to the council building, an aide rushed up to him. "Sir, should we begin evacuation protocols? Ready the defense systems." Miller just smiled. No need for that yet. First, we're going to give them something to study. Send them our history books. All of them, especially the ones about war. The aide looked confused, but Miller knew better. Sometimes the best weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb. Sometimes it was just making sure your opponent knew exactly what they were getting into. The underground command center beneath Geneva buzzed with activity. Military leaders from every major nation sat around a massive circular table, their faces lit by the blue glow of holographic displays. Ambassador Miller stood at the center, his hands clasped behind his back. "The Empire has given us 48 hours," Miller said, looking at each face around the table. "I suggest we use this time to teach them about human history." Admiral Thomas, an older man with weathered features, pressed a button on the table. The room's lights dimmed as a new hologram appeared, showing Earth's military history timeline. "In the last 100 years alone," Thomas said, pointing to the display, "humans have gone from basic flight to space travel. But that's not what should worry them." He paused, zooming in on specific dates. "What should worry them is how fast we adapt during wars." The display showed World War I aircraft, simple canvas and wood machines. Then it shifted to World War II, just 2 decades later, metal fighters screaming through the sky at hundreds of miles per hour. Miller nodded. "That's exactly what we need to show them. Not our current weapons, but how quickly we make new ones." "They'll think we're primitive," said General Lee, tapping her fingers on the table. "Their ships can cross galaxies. Our best rockets barely reach Mars." Miller smiled. "That's our advantage. They expect us to show them our weapons and beg for mercy. Instead, we'll show them our wars. All of them." The next few hours were spent preparing what Miller called the warning package. It wasn't filled with threats or displays of current military might. Instead, it contained something far more frightening: the truth. When Miller returned to the meeting with High Lord Blake, he carried a single data crystal. The Imperial leader's silver skin seemed to shimmer under the conference room lights as Miller sat down. "Have you come to accept the Empire's generous terms?" Blake asked, his large eyes reflecting confidence. "Actually," Miller said, sliding the crystal across the table, "we thought you might want to study this first. Consider it required reading before any decisions are made." Blake picked up the crystal with elegant fingers. "And this is Earth's military history, all of it. Every war, every battle, every conflict we've ever fought. Against others." Miller paused meaningfully. "And against ourselves." The Imperial computers quickly translated the data. As Blake watched, his confident expression began to fade. The first images showed ancient battles, humans fighting with spears and swords. But then the timeline accelerated. "This can't be correct," Blake said, his voice slightly higher than before. "Your species went from primitive projectile weapons to splitting the atom in less than 200 years. Keep watching," Miller suggested quietly. The images continued. World War I trenches filled with mud and blood. World War II's massive tanks and cities burning from atomic fire. Cold War missiles ready to destroy the world many times over. Modern warfare with drones and AI-driven combat systems. But these are, you fight against yourselves with such weapons. Blake's fingers trembled slightly as he worked the controls. "These casualty numbers, they must be wrong." "They're accurate," Miller said. "And those are just the direct military conflicts. You haven't gotten to the resistance movements yet. The guerrilla warfare sections, the parts about how humans fight when we're supposedly defeated." Blake's face had lost its silvery shine, turning almost gray. "Why are you showing me this?" Miller leaned forward. "Because the Empire needs to understand something. You see us as primitive because we haven't spread across the stars yet. But ask yourself this: what happens when a species that invented so many ways to fight on one planet gets access to an entire galaxy?" The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the holographic display, still showing scenes from humanity's violent past. "We don't want war, High Lord Blake," Miller continued, his voice gentle but firm. We're actually quite good at peace, but if you force us to fight, he gestured at the displays. Well, as you can see, we're exceptionally good at that too. Blake stood up abruptly. I must consult with Imperial Command. As the Imperial leader hurried out, Miller noticed his hands were shaking. Good. The warning had been delivered. Now they just had to wait and see if the Empire was wise enough to heed it. Looking at the still playing scenes of Earth's conflicts, Miller remembered an old saying. The most powerful weapon is the one you never have to fire. He hoped the Empire would understand that humanity's history was that weapon, and it was pointed right at them. High Lord Blake paced the command deck of his flagship, his silver skin now a dull gray from stress. The holographic displays around him showed endless streams of data from Earth's military history. Behind him, a team of Imperial analysts worked frantically to process the information. My lord, one analyst called out, his voice shaking. You need to see this section on human resistance movements. Blake moved to the analyst's station, where footage played of ancient warriors fighting against Roman legions with nothing but simple weapons and knowledge of the land. The scene shifted to show farmers turning their tools into weapons, fighting against trained soldiers. These are just farmers, the analyst said, not soldiers. But look at the damage they caused. Another analyst raised her hand. Sir, the human psychological studies are disturbing. When faced with superior forces, they don't surrender. They adapt. They improvise. The more you push them, the harder they fight back. Blake watched as the displays showed more examples. Vietnamese farmers in underground tunnels, Afghan tribesmen in mountain passes, city defenders in Stalingrad, all facing superior forces, all refusing to break. There's more, a third analyst said. Their entertainment, their movies, books, games. They spend their free time imagining new ways to fight enemies. Look at this. The screen showed clips from human movies, stories about fighting alien invasions, surviving apocalypses, resisting occupying forces. Thousands of them from every culture on Earth. They don't just train for war, the analyst explained. They dream about it. They imagine every possible way they might have to fight, and then they think of solutions. Even their children play war games. Blake sat heavily in his command chair. Show me their weapons development timeline again. The main screen lit up with a chart. It showed how humans went from basic gunpowder to nuclear weapons in just a few centuries. More importantly, it showed how warfare always made them develop faster. Focus on World War II, Blake ordered. The data streamed across the screen. In just 6 years, humans had invented radar, created the first computers, developed jet engines, split the atom, built rockets that could reach space. And they did all this, Blake muttered, while fighting each other. Imagine what they'll do when united against us. A new message flashed on the screen. Ambassador Miller was requesting another meeting. He claimed to have more information to share. In the conference room back on Earth, Miller sat calmly as Blake entered. The Imperial leader noticed more data crystals on the table. More history lessons, Blake asked, trying to sound confident. No, Miller replied. This is our psychology database, how humans think when we're threatened, how we react to invasion, what happens to our minds during war. He pushed one crystal forward. This first one is about guerrilla warfare, how regular people become fighters when their homes are threatened. Blake picked up the crystal. Why are you showing us all this? Miller leaned back. Because right now, your analysts are probably telling you we're primitive, that our weapons are basic, that your ships could destroy our cities from orbit. He smiled. But they're also telling you something else, aren't they? Something that worries them. Blake said nothing, but his gray skin grew even paler. They're telling you, Miller continued, that we're different, that we don't think like other species you've conquered, that we spend our peacetime preparing for war and our wartime inventing at incredible speeds. He pointed to the crystals. These records show how humans fought against overwhelming odds, how we survived ice ages with sticks and stones, how we turned our entire planet's industry to war production in just months, how we can teach farmers to be soldiers, workers to be saboteurs, children to be survivors. Blake stared at the crystals. The Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds. Yes, Miller agreed. But how many of those worlds had 6,000 years of recorded warfare to learn from? How many had already split the atom? How many had sent ships into space? How many had survived dozens of near-extinction events? He paused. How many had spent their entire history fighting themselves, getting better at war with each generation? Blake stood up slowly. I must report this to the Imperial Council. As he left, Miller called after him. We'll be here. We're very good at waiting. After all, we've spent thousands of years preparing for moments just like this. The door closed behind Blake, leaving Miller alone with the data crystals, humanity's true weapons in this confrontation. Not bombs or guns, but the collected knowledge of countless wars, endless conflicts, and the unbreakable human spirit that survived them all. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was quiet, just floating rocks in the endless dark of space, until it wasn't. Through his flagship's observation window, High Lord Blake watched as hundreds of small human ships appeared from behind various asteroids. They weren't military vessels. They were mining ships, construction vehicles, and cargo haulers, normal civilian craft that had been hiding in plain sight. My lord, an Imperial officer reported, the humans say this is just a mining exercise. They're asking us to observe. Blake's hands gripped the railing tighter. Mining exercise. Of course. The first demonstration started small. A mining laser, designed to cut through rock, sliced an asteroid in half with frightening precision. Then another mining ship used its magnetic grapples, meant for moving ore, to throw massive rocks at incredible speeds. Interesting choice of targets, Blake muttered, watching the rocks smash into carefully chosen points in space. If those had been ships. A message came through from Ambassador Miller, who was watching from Earth's command center. Just showing some basic mining techniques, his calm voice said. Though unsure your military analysts can think of other uses for such tools. The demonstration continued. Construction ships showed how quickly they could build structures in space, structures that could easily become barricades or fortifications. Cargo ships demonstrated their ability to quickly scatter and regroup, moving in patterns that any military commander would recognize as guerrilla warfare tactics. Sir, an Imperial analyst called out, we're detecting something strange. The humans are using civilian communication channels to coordinate these movements. But, he paused, looking confused, they're using thousands of different codes. They keep changing them. We can't keep up. Blake nodded slowly. The humans were showing them how civilian ships could become a militia fleet, using simple tools as weapons and civilian channels for military communication, all without officially doing anything threatening. Then came the most disturbing part. A large asteroid, nearly a kilometer wide, suddenly shifted its orbit. No ships were near it. No visible beams or forces were being applied. How are they moving it? Blake demanded. His science officer worked frantically at his console. My lord, they installed small engines on it months ago. They hid them in natural cracks in the rock. We didn't detect them because they looked like normal mineral deposits. Miller's voice came through again. We have similar engines on quite a few rocks out here. Makes mining easier, you understand. Though I suppose you could use them to drop asteroids on planets if you wanted to. Not that we would ever do that, of course. Blake watched as more asteroids began to move, creating a complex dance of potential weapons. Each one could be turned into a projectile. Each civilian ship could become a fighter. Each mining tool could become a weapon. Lord Blake, Miller continued, his voice still pleasant, you might want to check the sensor data from the dark side of your ships. We've had some interesting developments there too. Blake spun around. ordering scans of his fleet's blind spots. The results made his blood run cold. Small human ships had approached in the radio shadow of his own vessels, attaching themselves like remeras on Earth's ocean predators. "Don't worry," Miller said. "They're just repair pods, very useful for fixing hull damage, though I suppose they could also be used to cut into ships if someone were so inclined. Mining tools, you understand." The demonstration lasted another hour. The humans showed off more civilian capabilities: communication jamming disguised as sensor malfunctions, emergency flares that could blind military sensors, cargo containers that could hide smaller ships. Finally, Miller spoke again. "Just thought you might want to see how we handle our everyday space operations. Oh, and one more thing. A small fleet of ships emerged from behind Mars. These are our actual military vessels. We haven't shown you what they can do yet. Let's hope we don't have to." Blake stared at the scene before him. The humans had just demonstrated how they could turn every civilian ship, every asteroid, every piece of space debris into a weapon, without officially doing anything hostile. "Send a message to Imperial Command," Blake ordered, his voice hollow. "The humans don't need a massive military fleet. They've turned their entire civilization into a potential army." He paused, watching another asteroid change course. "And they're not showing us their real weapons yet." In the darkness of space, more civilian ships emerged, each one a reminder that humans didn't need warships to wage war. They just needed tools and the creativity to use them differently. The Empire had never faced an enemy like this before, one that could turn peaceful technology into weapons faster than military ships could respond. The demonstration was over, but the message was clear: take on humanity, and everything becomes a weapon. High Lord Blake stood before the Imperial Council's holographic projection, his report causing visible distress among the gathered leaders. "The humans cannot be this prepared," First Commander Ray said, his golden robes shimmering. "They only learned of our existence days ago." "That's where you're wrong," Blake replied. "They've been preparing for us, or someone like us, for centuries." He activated a display showing human satellite data. "And we just discovered something worse." The display showed thousands of small objects moving through Imperial space. They were everywhere, near trade routes around colony worlds, even close to the Empire's core systems. "Human ships?" someone asked. "Human people," Blake corrected, "working in our bars, our spaceports, our trading posts. They've been quietly spreading through our territory for the past 50 years. We never noticed because they look similar to many species. They called it their diaspora program." The council chamber erupted in concerned whispers. An older council member raised her hand. "Surely we can simply remove these humans from our territory." Blake laughed without humor. "They're not military agents. They're families, workers, traders, registered legally under various planetary systems. If we try to remove them—" He paused. "Well, that's what the humans want us to think about." The council's main screen lit up. A message from Earth was coming through. Ambassador Miller's calm face appeared before them. "Greetings, Imperial Council," Miller said pleasantly. "I trust Lord Blake is sharing our recent cultural exchange. We thought you might want to know about Phase 2. "Phase 2? First Commander Ray demanded. "Oh yes," Miller smiled. "See, those civilian ships we showed you in the asteroid belt? We have similar groups near every major Imperial world. All civilian, of course. All legal. All just going about their peaceful business." Blake watched the council members' faces pale. They were realizing what he already knew. Humanity had turned the Empire's own open border policies against them. And those humans living in Imperial space. Miller continued. "They're just honest workers. Though many of them did serve in Earth's military at some point. Fascinating how many of them chose to live near important Imperial facilities. Pure coincidence, I'm sure." First Commander Ray stood up. "This is an act of war." "No," Miller replied calmly. "This is immigration. This is free trade. This is using your own laws and systems exactly as written. We haven't broken a single Imperial regulation. His smile widened slightly. We just studied your empire very carefully while you weren't watching us. The display shifted to show more data. Human-owned businesses near military bases. Human traders along vital supply routes. Human engineers working in key facilities. Now, Miller continued, imagine if there was a conflict. Imagine how many critical systems might suddenly malfunction. How many ships might get lost in transit. How many supply chains might break down. He paused. Not that anyone would do such things. We're all peaceful citizens of the galaxy, after all. Blake watched the council members shift uncomfortably. The humans had built a network inside the Empire without firing a shot. They'd placed their pieces on the board before the game even began. We should demonstrate our military power, a younger council member suggested. Show them our fleet's true strength. They've already analyzed our fleet, Blake said tiredly. Those human workers in our shipyards. They'd been studying our technology for years. And knowing humans, they've probably figured out half a dozen ways to counter it. The council chamber's screens suddenly flickered. When they came back on, they showed views from across Imperial space. Human ships were conducting emergency drills near every major Imperial facility. Just civilian vessels running perfectly legal safety exercises. And yet, as you can see, Miller's voice returned, our people take safety very seriously. We're currently practicing emergency protocols across Imperial space. Just routine civilian preparedness, you understand. Blake watched the faces of the council members. They were finally understanding what he had learned days ago. The humans hadn't just prepared for war. They'd prepared for victory before the Empire even knew they existed. The choice is yours, Miller concluded. We're happy to remain peaceful neighbors. Or, he let the screen show another wave of human ships emerging from hyperspace, all civilian, all perfectly legal, all potentially lethal. We can see what happens when humans stop being peaceful. The council chamber fell silent. The Empire had never faced an enemy that could defeat them without fighting. They had never encountered a species that turned immigration and trade into weapons of war. They had never met humans before. The Imperial Intelligence Chief's hands shook as she placed the final report on the council table. The room was darker than usual, as if the very lights were afraid of what the documents contained. This can't be accurate, First Commander Ray whispered, looking through the files. The humans have plans for everything. Everything, High Lord Blake confirmed, his silver skin now almost white with stress. Their classified military archives were too easy to find. They wanted us to see this. The intelligence chief nodded. They have plans for full-scale war, guerrilla warfare, economic warfare, and something they call mutually assured destruction. She touched a control, bringing up images on the main screen. During something called the Cold War, they built enough weapons to destroy their own planet several times over. They lived like this for decades, with both sides ready to end everything at a moment's notice. The council watched in horror as the presentation continued. It showed human military scenarios, war games, and strategic plans developed over centuries. Plans for fighting enemies with superior technology. Plans for fighting enemies with superior numbers. Plans for fighting enemies they hadn't even met yet. This section is about their biological warfare capabilities, the intelligence chief continued. Humans can survive in almost any environment. They eat foods that would kill other species. Their bodies can adapt to most poisons given enough time. And their medical technology. She paused, looking ill. They can modify themselves faster than any species we've encountered. Blake pointed to another section of the report. Look at their history of resistance movements. Even when their cities were destroyed, when their armies were defeated, when all hope seemed lost, they kept fighting. There are records of human children fighting against armies, of prisoners organizing rebellions, of conquered peoples continuing to resist for generations. Surely we can still defeat them militarily, a younger council member suggested. Our technology. is being studied by every human engineer in our territory. Blake interrupted. And there's something else. Something worse. He brought up a new image, showing human entertainment media. Look at what they do for fun. The screen's filled with scenes from human movies, books, and games. Stories about humanity fighting against impossible odds. Tales of resistance against powerful alien empires. Scenarios of humans surviving after civilization's collapse. They don't just prepare for war, the intelligence chief explained. They imagine it. Dream about it. Their children play games about fighting superior forces. Their adults write stories about defeating advanced alien civilizations. They've been mentally preparing their entire species for this moment for generations. First Commander Ray slumped in his chair. How do you defeat an enemy that has spent its entire history thinking about ways to fight you? That's not even the worst part, Blake said quietly. Show them the expansion data. New charts appeared on the screens. They showed humanity's rate of technological advancement, their speed of adaptation, their ability to reverse engineer alien technology. Based on our analysis, the intelligence chief reported, if we engage in full warfare, the humans will advance their technology by centuries within years. They develop fastest during conflicts. The more we fight them, the stronger they'll become. And if we try to destroy them completely? Someone asked. Blake laughed bitterly. Their strategists call it the cockroach scenario. Even if we destroyed every major human city, there would be survivors. Survivors who know how to rebuild, who have hidden caches of technology, who have trained their entire lives for post-apocalyptic situations. He shook his head. And those survivors would never stop coming for us. Never stop planning. Never stop fighting. The council chamber fell into heavy silence. Centuries of imperial expansion, dozens of successful planetary integrations, all their protocols and procedures, none of it had prepared them for humans. There's one last thing, the intelligence chief said. We found their deepest classified files, the ones they pretend to hide. She looked around the room. They're worse than everything else we've seen. Not because they're frightening, but because they're empty. Empty. Several council members asked at once. They're decoys, Blake realized. Which means, the intelligence chief confirmed, everything we've discovered, everything they've shown us, everything we've learned. It's only what they want us to know. We have no idea what their real capabilities are, or their real plans. The room fell silent again. The mighty Galactic Empire, which had never lost a war, was facing an enemy that had defeated them without firing a shot. An enemy that turned immigration into invasion, trade into tactical advantage, and civilian life into military preparation. They had finally met their match, and their match had been ready for them for a very, very long time. The Imperial flagship's command deck was silent as High Lord Blake, prepared to transmit the Empire's official declaration. Behind him, the massive fleet that had arrived to intimidate Earth was already beginning its withdrawal, ships slipping away into hyperspace one by one. On the main screen, Ambassador Miller waited patiently, that same calm smile on his face that had unsettled Blake from their first meeting. The Imperial Council has reached its decision, Blake announced, his voice formal but strained. All human-occupied space, including the Sol system and its surrounding sectors, is hereby classified as a restricted zone. Code designation: Extreme Hazard. Do not engage. Miller nodded politely. A wise decision, High Lord Blake. I assume this means the Empire withdraws its integration demands. Correct. Blake's silver skin had a permanent grayish tint now. Furthermore, the Empire is establishing what we call the Human Exception Clause in our expansion protocols. No Imperial forces will enter human space without explicit permission. No military actions will be taken against human interests. Excellent, Miller replied. Though I notice your mining ships are already evacuating their operations near our borders. Blake's jaw tightened. Yes, we thought it prudent to reduce civilian activities in the region as well. The truth went unspoken. The Empire wasn't just withdrawing its military, it was running away. Every Imperial ship, station, and facility within 100 light-years of human space was being evacuated. No one wanted to be near the species that had turned preparation for war into an art form. One last thing, Blake added. We found your real military archives. For the first time, Miller's smile changed slightly. Did you now? No, Blake admitted. We found where they should be. Empty spaces, missing data, gaps in your records that make no sense. He leaned forward. Everything you showed us, everything we discovered, it was just the tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? Miller's smile returned to normal. Hi, Lord Blake. Let me tell you a story. During something we called the Cold War, two human powers had enough nuclear weapons to destroy Earth many times over. But the real weapons, the worst ones, those were never written down, never recorded, never leaked. He paused. Some secrets are best kept in the dark. Blake felt a chill run down his spine. The Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds, Ambassador Miller. We've defeated armies of billions. Yet here we are, retreating from a single species that hasn't even colonized its own star system. No, Miller corrected gently. You're retreating from a species that turned its entire history into a weapon. Every war we fought taught us lessons. Every battle made us stronger. Every conflict showed us new ways to survive. His smile remained, but his eyes were steel. We didn't need to build a massive fleet to defeat you. We just needed you to understand what would happen if you forced us to build one. The last Imperial ships were disappearing into hyperspace now. Supply bases were being abandoned. Colony worlds near human space were being evacuated. The mighty Empire was running from a fight for the first time in its history. One last question, Blake said. Your people scattered throughout Imperial space, the ones near our facilities and bases, are just innocent civilians, Miller finished, living their lives, running their businesses, raising their families. Though I suppose some of them might have interesting hobbies. Humans do love their hobbies. The threat was clear. Those humans would remain in Imperial space, a constant reminder that humanity could reach the Empire anywhere, anytime. Goodbye, Ambassador Miller, Blake said finally. I hope we never have reason to meet again. Oh, I wouldn't say that, Miller replied. Once your people calm down, we should discuss trade agreements. After all, we're not enemies. We're just neighbors who understand each other better now. As the communication ended, Blake looked out at Earth one last time. Such a small planet. Such a limited space presence. Such a terrifying species. In the years to come, the Empire would add a new question to its planetary assessment protocols. Do they think like humans? If the answer was yes, that planet was immediately classified as too dangerous to approach. Humanity had won its greatest victory without firing a shot, without launching a fleet, without starting a war. They had won by being human, by turning their violent history into a shield, their preparation into a weapon, and their reputation into a wall no empire dared to break. The Empire had ruled the galaxy through force. Humanity now ruled their corner of it through fear, the fear of what they could do if pushed too far. And somewhere on Earth, Ambassador Miller smiled, knowing that humanity's greatest weapon had been the truth. They were exactly as dangerous as they claimed to be.